the multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia in adults. So before that, I would like to talk about, I'd like to give a brief background about the pneumococcus. As you know, that pneumococcus is still the most common cause of community-acquired pneumonia worldwide. And the problem is there are various serotypes, like till now it's like 100 serotypes already discovered. And this serotype varies with age and geography. And if you see the serotyping, this is the conventional serotyping method. So in this, like the antisera, which is against this capsule, and then react, and we identify that this is a particular serotype. And it's important because our body produces the antibody against a specific antigen, and it has a productive role. And the vaccine have been produced depending on this antigen, depending on the antigenic characteristics of the pneumococcus. So there are more than almost 100 serotypes. There are serotypes that are covered, like 23 serotypes in these polysaccharide vaccines. And so it was came into market in 1980. But this vaccine doesn't induce immunity very well, and it doesn't work for children distant.
Hey, can you just stop? And Kubo Sensei, can you mute the computer, because we're picking from your computer.
I think you're right.
No.
Can you make your computer mute?
Okay, I see. Okay, I see.
If you, I think. Okay.
Yeah, there was an echo actually.
Yes, please go on, please.
Okay. So there are two types of is the polysaccharide vaccine, and one is conjugated vaccine. So polysaccharide vaccine is an old vaccine, and it is particularly given to the old people, adults. Whereas conjugated vaccines is given to it can be given to young children also. So I started this conjugated vaccine started in 2000 with the 7-valent vaccines. So at the beginning they choose the most common serotype prevalent in USA, and because choose only 7 because it's difficult to conjugate with the protein. The polysaccharides should be conjugated to the protein, and the molecule is bigger, and technologically it's difficult. So later they started in 13-valent vaccine, up to 13 valents, adding 6 more extra in 2010. And it's been in the market. So in Japan, 7-valent was I think government allowed to use in 2010, and in 13-valent vaccines are used in national immunization program. So when the PCV7 was introduced in USA, the PCV7 vaccine serotypes were dramatically reduced. So as you see in this graph, that vertical line shows the rate invasive pneumococcal disease in children, rate per 100,000 populations. And so the central axis shows the year. So in 2000, it was introduced. And you can see the in different age group, this is less than, the green one is 1 year, and less than 1 year, and 2 years, and 3 years. So mostly in the young children, your babies, 1 to 3 years, the dramatically reduce the vaccine serotype. And this happens, this effect also observed in the adults because of the herd immunity. And so at the beginning, everybody was very happy, and the PCV7, after PCV7, PCV10, and PCV13 came. But
may I ask a question, Bhim?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's like it's reducing.
No problem.
Before the vaccine was introduced in the under 1 age group. So what's the explanation for that? I guess some people may say, if you just follow the green line, it's already reduced. When the vaccine is introduced, then it continues to reduce. Some people may say already reducing. Yeah. What?
I think it's just a variation in the data.
Just by chance.
That's real. Yeah, I think so. But
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The later, we know lots of people reported the non-vaccine serotype is emerging, and particularly in adults more than 65 years age. So this figure shows the study in 10 European countries, and then the data from 2011 to 2015, and it was compared with the 2009. It's a pre-PCV10. So when they compare, they found that in adults also the PCV serotypes were dramatically reduced, and PCV13 serotypes, I mean, those 6 serotypes in addition to PCV7, they are also reduced. However, the non-PCV13 serotypes, they are gradually going up. Every year is going up. So now people are very much worried that non-PCV13 serotypes are going up gradually every year. So whether this vaccine is really, I mean, what will happen after a few years? So it's really now debatable. And at the beginning, people used to think that PCV13 can replace the PBB23 polysaccharide vaccines, but once we see this kind of pattern, so now it's really difficult to decide. And similar, this is the data from the national surveillance in England and Wales. So if you see this horizontal axis is from 2000 to 2016, it's like 17 years of data. And the first one in the vertical axis, it shows the invasive pneumococcal disease incidence for 100,000 populations. So in all ages, and they have 2 vertical lines. This first one is PCV7 introduction, it's like a 2005, and PCV13 introduction is in 2009, 2010. So if you see all cases, so after introduction of PCV13, after a few years, it's going up, particularly 2013, 2014, after, let's say, about 4 or 5 years of introduction of the PCV13, all cases also going up. But if you see the non-PCV13 serotype, this one, the blue, sky blue, is going up even after from the PCV7 introduction. And these are the different age groups, less than 2 years, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 14, 15 to 45, 45 to 64, and more than 65 years. So this emergence of these non-vaccine serotypes are very much pronounced in this age group, more than 65 years of age. So, so why it's happening like this? Why non-vaccine serotype is emerging? So there are various reasons, like people are thinking. One is like capsule switching, like there is vaccine serotype, and when you give a vaccine, the vaccine serotype to protect itself from the vaccines, so the bacteria change into have a different antigen. So it's capsule switching. But and another phenomenon is like unmasking. So there is different serotypes together, and once you give one vaccine serotype, the vaccine serotype goes down, and the non-vaccine serotype come up. So this is the later explanation, maybe the more common, because the vaccine, I mean, the capsular switching, it does occur. Actually, it is reported before PCV7 introduction. The capsular occur, and some paper also shows that after introduction of these conjugate vaccines, the rate of capsular switch has gone up, but it should not be so much that the bacterial type incidence is becoming so much like a problematic. So here you can see like it has doubled from the beginning of this. Particularly if you see like here the blue line here is like it's between 10 to 15, and if it's here it's like around 25 the incidence per 100,000. So it has really gone up. So one of our interest is to try to explore this multiple. I mean, so we think that there are multiple serotypes, more than one serotype at the moment. And when you give one vaccine serotype, non-vaccine serotype come up. So one of the interests is to explore these multiple serotypes. So as we know that the pneumococcus starts its pathogenesis from the nasopharynx.
Next slide. Can I have just one quick question regarding into this Lancet paper? Is there anyone who was looking at the sequence type before and after PCV13 vaccine introduction, especially among those non-vaccine type groups? Because most likely, our expectation is that they just switched the serotype, and then all the other, frame, some sort of the background frame that's has efficient replication, but then they just repressed the serotype. But there must be someone working on, not just based on serotype.
Yes, I think there are some papers like showing the transfer of the capsular gene from one serotype to another serotype. But they think the rate of this capsular switching is not so much high.
Okay, fine.
So is it possible, like immediately after introduction of PCV, then the non-vaccine serotype emerges so much? So that is the question. But yeah, I think there are some papers.
Yeah, okay, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So pneumococcus start from nasopharynx. So in this nasopharynx, in addition to the pneumococcal bacteria, pneumococcus, there are other bacteria as well as viruses too. So pneumococcus, when there is like a interaction between the viruses as well as bacteria, and when they are more than one type present, so it is that they exchange their genetic material DNA, and that help them to, one is capsular switching, another is for antibiotic resistance to exchange the gene for antibiotic resistance, and another thing is for that they form the biofilm so that they can inhibit the antibodies as well as antibiotics. So when these bacteria, normally they are present, but sometimes due to the like so it can
Hashi sensei maybe needs to mute. Ken maybe needs to mute because it's clashing. Takahashi sensei.
Yes.
Can you mute?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, Bhim. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah. So the bacteria, the pneumococcus can go to alveoli and it can cause pneumonia. So it can be invasive as most of the time it's non-invasive, but once it goes to the blood, it can cause septicemia, as well as it can go to the meninges and meningitis and other sterile reasons. It can cause other infections. So this one this slide shows the 3 different stages of pathogenesis. One is just colonization, normal colonizations. Here is most of the pneumococcus, this black kidney cell is a pneumococcus. So there are few bacteria and generally they are in the mucus. And few are attached with the epithelial tissues. So generally they don't cause much inflammations. And it's a known disease as well, it's colonizations. But due to some reason, they get more number and they can cause inflammation here. So at this time, the bacteria still hasn't crossed the epithelial barrier, but they cause the inflammation. So these are the non-invasive diseases like pneumonia, sinusitis, otitis media. So some of the pneumococcal diseases are non-invasive type, almost 70%. So at this moment, like if you do blood culture, you cannot get an organism, but you can, in pneumonia, of course, you can see sexual. So the third one is invasive one. So the pneumococcus, the bacteria passes through the epithelial tissues and come to the blood circulations, and it can cause meningitis also and bacteremia. So in that case, you can see you can find the bacteria in the blood. So particularly the pneumonia is very, very common, non-invasive pneumonia, and it's really difficult to diagnose the invasive case because you cannot find in the blood. So, and to get a good sputum, and then sometimes you cannot get a good sputum, and to bronchoalveolar levels is difficult. So conventional way of identifying the pneumococcal pneumonia, diagnosing pneumococcal pneumonia, it's really challenge, and more so for the serotyping because it's really tedious to find one colony and confirm the bacteria as a strep pneumonia, and then after that doing subculture and then do the serotyping. It's a really difficult task. So people are thinking to find the new methods, molecular methods, and to diagnose pneumococcal pneumonia. So another point is like there are many types, like I know that there are more than 98 to 100 types of serotypes. So at one time, there can be more than one serotype. So we cannot be sure that, okay, only one serotype goes and causes disease. So why not serotype, but serotype can go and cause disease. So it's some papers have reported up to 6 serotypes can present at one time. So it's really difficult that when we do the blood culture, so we try to find one colony, and then we serotype that, isolate, and then we say, okay, this is the cause of the bacteria, pneumonia or meningitis. So generally, microbiologically, like a pure colony, one colony, we diagnose that way, and that's a limitation of this conventional culture. So in this slide, I wanted to show you that there are actually case reports showing that there are invasive diseases cause more than one serotype. So the first case was like a 60-year-old male here with meningitis. So he has a serotype 9V, which is penicillin resistant, and another serotype 7, which is penicillin susceptible. So they are isolated from CSP. So it has clinical implication also. So if we identify only serotype 7 and miss serotype B, so and you get the report like a CSF culture report, sensitive, penicillin sensitive. Actually, the patient doesn't improve without penicillin, right? So it has clinical implications. So there's another case report, like a 10-month-old infant. So like there are 2 serotypes. One serotype was 23F, it was isolated from blood, and another was 23B, it was isolated from CSF. And both were penicillin resistant. So I feel like it's just a limitation of diagnostic assays, but there could be more than one serotype at one time. And there's one study, like this is the only one study I came across, like there's a study from the National Surveillance of Invasive Pneumococcal Disease in South Africa. So they did a 10 years period, like a 2005 to 2014, and 40,000 cases of invasive pneumococcal disease. And they had like a 28,000 isolates of pneumococcus. So out of that, they found only 35 cases had 2 serotypes. And these two serotypes, and mostly that 73% of these co-infecting serotypes had different antibiotic profiles. And when they have very few variable, and they did analysis, and they found that the multiple serotype was associated with children less than 5 years of age and some underlying these illnesses other than HIV and death. So I was thinking, like, with this, based on this paper, I was thinking that multiple serotype infection is more severe than the single serotype. And this is the only paper I have found, large scale study. And they have wrote like this, like I just quote from their paper. So our laboratory has been working with a large number of pneumococcal isolate for more than 2 decades. Given the challenges of QLung means that the way you detect, identify the serotype. QLung, in detecting multiple serotypes from one source, we believe that the high level of experience and expertise of our technicians made discoveries of dual serotypes during the routine serotyping possible. They say discoveries, right? And we also believe that the use of molecular serotyping could improve our detection rate. So people used to think that due to the limitation of the conventional serotyping, that multiple serotypes could not be detected or could not be known for a long time. So that was the background. So regarding the diagnosing pneumococcal pneumonia, so PCR came up, molecular method came up, and it was being compared with the sputum as well as blood culture and urine bioindex. In this example, with a 222 community-acquired pneumonia cases, the proportion of detection of pneumococcus by blood culture was like 8.9%, and urinary test by next now is 21%, sputum good quality 45%, and by Lite PCR is a 67%. And they make a composite diagnostic standard, like blood culture positive, urine antigen positive, and this sputum positive. And against that, they compare with the cutoff value of 10⁴, 10,000 copies of pneumococcus. And they found that sensitivity was 78% and specificity was 80%. So similarly, there are other papers who are comparing with the Lite real-time PCR at the bacterial density of 10⁴ copies per ml. And here, this in cap, pneumococcus cap and non-pneumococcus cap. So this is Lite. So the sensitivity was like 94%. So the specificity was like 96%. So what I wanted to say is that pneumococcal pneumonia can be diagnosed with a real-time PCR with cutoff value. So besides that, there's other papers like a use of real-time PCR in emergency to diagnose pneumococcal pneumonia. So in this paper, they say sensitivity 90% and specificity. Similar in other paper, like 97% and 60% specificity. They use like not Lite, they use animalysin. So the specificity was a bit low in these two papers. So with this background, like we also had in our in-house nanofluidic real-time PCR system. The good thing is that it can detect multiple serotypes, so that we could answer some of the questions, and it can also quantify the load of pneumococcus. And in this assay, we can detect 50 serotypes of all vaccine serotypes, including both PCV13 as polysaccharide vaccines. And during this development of this test, compare this test, real-time PCR test, with the conventional culture method at the serotype level. So we tested 52 nasopharyngeal samples. This is from children in Vietnam. By culture method, we had, there was 23 positive cases, but in nanofluidic system, we found 40. And this nanofluidic system detected all the culture positive samples. Sensitivity was 100%. And specificity at the serotype level, the only one was mismatch, this one. But yeah, it's 95%. And Dr. Kakuichi, now he compared with the urine antigen test and the culture method, and he compared the different cutoff value with the pneumococcal load. And at the 10⁻⁴, the urine index was the highest, 0.87, and sensitivity was 90%, and specificity was 96%. And this is by this Bayesian model, and to diagnose the vaccine type pneumococcal pneumonia only. This is for vaccine type. So with this background, that in this what we try to do is we try to determine the prevalence of multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, because we didn't know before, and then we try to explore the characteristics of clinical characteristics of serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, and to determine the distribution of vaccine serotypes among these multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. So in methods, so this is a part of the adult pneumonia study group Japan, and it was a prospective multi-center study of adult pneumonia that was carried out from 2000 to 2014. And it was carried out in 4 hospitals in 4 different islands, Ibitsu Hospital in Hokkaido, Kamel Medical Center Honshu, Chikamuri in Shikoku, and Jujenkai in Kyushu, Nagasaki. So study population was all patients in emergency and OPD. Enrollment criteria is more than 15 years, and patient having the symptom of pneumonia like fever, cough, sputum production, periodic chest pain, difficulty breathing, and chest X-ray positive findings, or sometimes CT scan also. And sample collected good sputum samples and blood samples were collected at the time of admissions, and chest X-ray were taken within 24 hours of admission. So this is sputum to about 250 microliter of sputum was collected, and 80 microliter of DNA was expressed. And at the beginning, this is the samples were screened for pneumococcus by light real-time PCR, this machine, and those who are then the target is amplified, so that the specificity will be better. And in the real-time PCR system, we determine the serotype and try to identify the load bacterial density. So during the study period, there were total 3,600 patients who were approached, and then 130 patients did not fulfill the 3 criteria, and 3,470 patients were enrolled in the study. And out of them, like 299 patients, they did not collect the sputum. So 3,131 samples, sputum samples were collected. And for PCR, only 2,605 samples were available. And we tested by light, and 516 samples was positive for pneumococcus. And when we come see the load, 40 samples had a load less than 10⁻⁴, so they were excluded. So we 476 patients had a pneumococcal density more than 10⁻⁴ per ml. So we use this criteria, cutoff criteria, and while we do serotyping, we found that 276 has single serotype, and 200 patients had multiple serotype, 2 or more than 2 serotypes. So this table shows the characteristics of the indoor patients. So median age was 77, and 75% of the patients were more than 65 years of age, and 59.5% were male. And most of the criteria, like if you see the CR, CRP 32%, they have a rate CRP. 67% has lobar consolidations. The interesting thing is the like vaccines, polysaccharide vaccine, 25% have the pneumococcal vaccine, polysaccharide vaccine in the last 5 years. And some risk factors like aspiration and diabetic mellitus, like 54% has a risk of aspirations and 20% has diabetic mellitus. So in terms of different hospitals, like Chikamori, like we have 100 cases out of 598, like a 16.7%, BBS to 17, Guy 18.9, Kameda 19%, overall like 18.3% of the pneumonia cases were diagnosed as pneumococcal pneumonia. So when we compare the pneumococcal pneumonia and non-pneumococcal pneumonia, so pneumococcal pneumonia tend to be a little bit more prevalent in younger age, a little bit younger, not so younger, like 72 and the age group, yeah, if you less than 65 or more than 65, you compare, the proportion is higher in more less than 65. And the temperature, you can see the pneumococcal pneumonia tend to have fever, hypoxemia, leukocytosis, C-reactive protein more, and consolidations, so more. And the interesting thing is I couldn't find any significant difference with pneumococcal and non-pneumococcal in terms of the pneumococcal vaccines. Central clinical characteristics, so smokers more tend to be like pneumococcal, they tend to have pneumococcal pneumonia. And if you see the risk of aspirations and diabetes mellitus, much different. And here RSV is co-infections, and rhinovirus co-infections seem to be associated with pneumococcal pneumonia. So distributions like by age, so the black one shows the total pneumonia cases, and blue one single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. Green one is multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. So at the age of like 65, if you see before 65, this green bar is taller than the other bars. Right? So multiple serotype tend to, I think the proportion is higher than the single serotype. And after this, like it's lower than the pneumonia as well as the single serotype pneumonia. So sorry, this is a bit busy table. So here, what I try to do is I try to compare the multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia with the non-pneumococcal pneumonia, and now this same clinical characteristics. And this is a univariate analysis, and this is multivariate analysis. So and this one shows the single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. So you can compare the single serotype, multiple serotype, and non-pneumococcal. So 24.3 less than 65 years of age. Here is also 20, but it's 37. So multiple serotype tend to be more common in less than 65 years of age. By age, like 63, 61, not much different. Fever, 37, 41, and 28. So if you compare this multiple and pneumococcus, yeah, it's significant. So heart rate is 1.78. Hypoxemia, 16.8 and 12% is 0.5 p-value. And similarly, you can see the liquor C-reactive protein, So if you compare single and multiple, not much big difference, but here if you compare with the non-pneumococcal, it's a bit different and it's associated with a multiple serotype. Similarly, lobar pneumonia and the vaccine. If you see the vaccine, it's 16.9% and it's 27% in non-pneumococcal, and it's a single serotype. It's also 20%. So the odds ratio is 0.55. So it's interesting finding. And other clinical features, if you see like a current smokers, it's associated with the multiple serotype as well as single serotype, and COPD, not much different. Cough aspirations, yes, it's associated with the multiple serotype. Diabetes mellitus, not much different. Influenza, interestingly, I was thinking maybe it's, but we couldn't, the data doesn't show any associations. RSV, multiple serotype, it is associated with the multiple serotype. You can see, though the sample size is less, but there's a clear difference between single serotype pneumonia, multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. And for rhinovirus, single and multiple both are similar, but it is different from the non-pneumococcal pneumonia. And it is associated with the, both of them are associated with serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. Then I try to compare with a single serotype as well as multiple serotype head-to-head. And the only significant finding was 8, like 37% and 24%. So p-value is significant. Others one was these vaccines was significant, right? So it seems like polysaccharide vaccines is protective for multiple serotype. And this is the same continuous table for the previous one or the other characteristics. So no, there is no significant p. And this one is just like a supplementary table. So I'm just trying to compare the single serotype and non-pneumococcal serotype pneumonia, non-pneumococcal pneumonia. So it is very much similar to like a multiple serotype. So associated with the fever, although this is not associated with the age less than 65, we found association in multiple serotype pneumococcus pneumonia, but not in single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. But it was associated with the fever and with C-reactive protein. Lower consolidation, p-value 0.56. And for pneumococcus, this polysaccharide vaccine, I couldn't find any association. I mean, it's not significant association when you compare the single serotype with non-pneumococcal. Yeah. But the current smoking, yes, there is a significant associations and risk of aspirations. And rhino. So for multiple serotype pneumococcus, we found the RSV as well as rhino, both were associated, but the single serotype only rhino was associated. So when we see the serotype distribution, like so there are 5 different colors. So first one is a blue one. So this one is single serotype. The serotype distribution among the single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, And other three are, I took them, although there are 5 different serotypes we identify in few cases, but due to the sample size, I select 3, only 3. First dominant, second dominant, third dominant. These are multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. So, and the first 13, they are the PCB13 serotypes, so they are in the order of the vaccines. So for first 7 are the PCB, and then adding to the PCB10, and these 3 more is like a PCB13 serotype. And others are the additional serotypes which are present in polysaccharide vaccines. So they are like a non-PCB13 but polysaccharide vaccines. So what you can see is serotype 3 is really dominant. It's the most common serotype, both as single serotype as well as multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. And besides that, like stain A looks very dominant, and it's more dominant in the multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. And this other like a green and purple, if you see, this green and purple tend to be more common purple here in these non-PCB13 serotypes. So to clarify more, I try to, these are the vaccine serotype just for you to, so these are the same pattern, I put in the same pattern. So when you categorize these different serotype, like a PCB7 serotypes, PCB10 serotype, PCB13 serotype, and non-PCB13 PPV, PPSP23 serotype. So I grouped them, and then you can see this one are the distribution of the serotype pneumococcus pneumonia, 276. And these 3 are the, according to the dominance, like first dominant serotype, second dominant serotype, and third dominant serotype. So sample size is 200, 200 in first and second. That's why they became in the multiple serotype, and the third dominant was 71. So what you can see is like a PCB7 serotype, if you see it's almost same, whether they are single serotype pneumococcus or multiple serotype pneumococcus, not PCB10 serotype is also not very much changed. And PCB13 also looks, I think, same, this one and this one. But this non-PCB13 serotype, we see like single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia and multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. The proportion is increasing as more serotypes are there. So if you compare this single serotype, it's like a 25%. Here it's like more than 50, so it's almost more than double. So what I was thinking, like the PCB previously we found like the polysaccharide vaccines, 23-valent polysaccharide vaccines. I think it works mostly for this non-PCB13 serotype, because this multiple serotype, the proportion of the vaccine vaccinated people were less in the multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia compared to single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia in terms of the vaccine proportions, and in terms of the vaccine serotype distributions, also that non-PCB serotype vaccine proportions are higher in multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. So I tend to feel like these polysaccharide vaccines are more effective for these non-PCB serotypes. So in load,
in the previous Bhim-san, and sorry for interrupt. In the previous slide, I'm not sure about what is the proportion in the y-axis. I mean, what is the denominator of this proportion? I'm not.
This now.
276, but in this 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like a blue bar is 25 and the red bar is 25 and the green one is 45 or something. So there's nothing like 100%.
Yeah.
So what is the denominator
because
proportion?
You mean the, sorry, you mean the 200%?
So I'm not sure, but it's not like the blue plus red plus green plus purple. It's not like 100%, right?
So I think it should be 100%, no?
Oh, really? So
I think so.
yeah. Okay. So
I saw you.
No, I think you.
I can show you. I think.
We don't need. I mean, we don't need to have 100% because.
Yeah, and I think
you're not showing.
I didn't include also, so I'm a little bit confused. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not showing pneumococcus, which is not belonging to any of these. So you don't. It doesn't have to be the 100%. Some of these doesn't have to be.
Sorry, I see. Because PCB7 and the PCB10, there is a duplicate. Right? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I understand.
So, but if you think about the PEP, like a polysaccharide vaccine serotype only, like you can add this one and this one. So it will become like a, for example, this is 50% and this is like a 40%. If you do this 90%, so it will be like 90% of the serotype. And the third dominant is like a polysaccharide vaccine serotype. Whereas in the single serotype pneumococcus, if you like, this is about 25%, and this is about the 45 and 25 and 45, like 70, right? So yeah, we can see like that also, but only for these two, because these are the PCB13 and
yeah, I think we understand. You can go on next.
Yeah. So when I see the bacterial load, so this is a single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. And for multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, so this is the dominant, like a 200 sample, 200 like a first dominant, second dominant, third, fourth, and fifth. So fourth and fifth is like a very, only 8 sample was 8 patient had this 4 serotype, and 2 patients have the 2 serotype. So what I wanted to show you is that there's not difference, big difference, like there's no difference, significant difference between the single serotype and first serotype. But among the multiple serotype, one is dominant. If you see, this is like log is like 1.8 log different, almost like 100 times different between the first serotype and second serotype. But there is no difference like a second and third and fourth, it's almost same. So why it's happening like this? So that is also like interesting questions, why it's happening like this. So some of the pairs, like clearly those, I mean, and we have found the same observation in the nasopharyngeal samples, children's nasopharyngeal samples, same observation, one dominant, others are not dominant, even though they are present like that. So, the explanation, the explanation is like when there are more than 2 serotypes present, so they compete for the nutrition and space. Particularly, I'm talking about the nasopharynx and the colonization in terms of colonizations. And besides that, the pneumococcus, like they try to dominate. They try to they secrete like one type of hormone. The bacteria, other serotype, it can be killed, like a fratriciding property. So they do have that kind of property. And so, and one dominant, another dominant. So if we think about the vaccine, like okay, vaccine introduction, this dominant serotype, if it's a vaccine serotype, so with the vaccine effect, it will be subsided. And the non-vaccine serotype, if it's a non-vaccine serotype, and once is the non-vaccine serotype come up. So this unmasking phenomenon, what many people believe that the emergence of non-vaccine serotype after the introduction of conjugated vaccines. So I think this may be one of the reasons why the non-PCV13 serotypes have been emerged. So this is my last slide. Last slide. So major finding of these studies are like 75% patients with pneumonia were more than 65 years of age. So for elderly, this is really a big problem, and almost 60% were male. So why men? Why not female? Right. So this is also a little bit interesting finding. And 25.9% of these patients, they have polysaccharide vaccines 5 years, and prevalence of pneumococcal pneumonia among these was like 18.3%. It's a really big high because of we have the sensitive method. That's why. And multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia was very common, like just 42% after cutoff. It became like 42%. So it's really like a huge number. So we didn't have any thoughts about this before. And with the non-pneumococcal pneumonia, multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia was associated with age less than 65 years of age, fever, hypoxemia, raised CRP, lower consolidations, risk of aspirations. And having a polysaccharide vaccine in the last 5 years seemed to be protective. So odds ratio was 0.62, and compare it to single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia was associated with age and age less than 65 years of age, and having polysaccharide vaccine last 5 years seem to be protective if you compare head to head, even with a single serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. In that case, odds ratio was 0.57, so 43% vaccine effectiveness if you see, and it was significant. And we found like 28 different serotypes groups of pneumococci, and non-PCV13 polysaccharide serotypes were prevalent among multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia. This is also interesting finding. Serotype specific median bacterial density was about 1.8 log different between dominant and second dominant serotype. However, bacterial densities of other serotypes were similar to second dominant serotype among multiple serotypes in multiple serotype pneumococcus pneumonia. So that's all. Thank you.
Ben, can you go back to one more? The first conclusion slide.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's very nice, very clear cut, very nice data, but the conclusion was very disappointing. Well, from my point of view, it's nothing really new, and I think that I have many negative comments on. I'm sorry to say, the data is very beautiful, but the way you interpret is quite different from I interpret. I think your main objective is you think that a multiple cell type has clinical impact. But your data is saying to me there's no impact on clinical outcome.
Yeah, at the beginning I thought that way and tried to compare, but
and let me just compare.
So it's related with the vaccines one.
All vaccines make sense is compare between multiple cell type and a single cell type. And if there is any convincing associations with clinical severity, then I'm okay. But what you first compared between pneumococcus, non-pneumococcus, And there are quite, several, associations, and that's fine. That's very beautiful. And then next things you compare is multiple cell type and then single cell type. And from my point of view, there's almost nothing to, clinically significant impact. So forget about this. All my interest is this table 5. And you have to tell me what's new to me. And you said that SV23, this polysaccharide vaccines, Motoi's paper shown that if we measure the vaccine impact efficacy based on serotype specific vaccine efficacy, we can clearly show the PPV23 is effective against the PPV23 vaccine serotype, but not against vaccine non-vaccine serotype. That's already shown very nicely in Lancet paper from this data set. So this information already finished. So this is nothing quite new. And if you want to really test the impact of PPV23, you have to do, test the test negative control.
Negative.
Yeah. But this multiple and single cell type, I mean, it's really nothing to do with, you have to really stratify the vaccine serotype. And this is just reflection. This is just confounding. This is just a reflection of vaccine serotype. And you have just shown multiple cell type has more PPV23 specific serotype. So it really doesn't make sense to me. This is nothing new. And then if we want to actually address this question, this is not the way to do it. So I just want to know, is there any really clinical significant impact on clinical outcome by multiple cell type? And it really doesn't, none of these. Can you?
If you compare with the single serotype, then
Did I miss anything? And also, you convinced me there's no impact by second dominant, the pneumococcus. You show me the bacterial load. There was almost 2 log difference from the first dominant, second dominant. And in the very beginning, you said that you make only bacterial load over 10⁴ is some meaningful. And then almost all of this second or third dominant one is.
No, I said this.
Is that not true?
No, I think this is a 10⁴ this is a diagnostic. In terms of diagnosis, that's important.
Yes, but
Here, it's not a matter of diagnosis. It's a matter of other thing, microbiology thing.
Yeah,
gene exchange and
bacterial load is 100 times lower. How come this, second dominant one has effect on clinical outcome? So, you have shown. I mean, if you could show almost 2 equally, replicating bacteria around, and then it may we may tend to think that it may have some clinical significance, but you have nicely shown the bacterial load is almost 100 times lower. How can we be convinced that the second dominant one play a role in the disease severity?
Yeah, in terms of severity now, the data doesn't show. I agree that I used to think that's how African bird, then
so
maybe we can see the similar pattern. But I agree that
this is very nice paper, and then you duplicate what you have discovered in your chance in the child populations. in the child populations. And then you have shown something like this.
But I think this
and then you said even in adult population in Japan, in a different country, we are seeing exactly the same pattern. And then we don't see any significant difference in terms of single infection and multiple infections. And then so that's the kind of, and some serotypes hidden behind by the dominant one, there are non-vaccine serotypes are around. So that is another important information. So so once we reduce the vaccine serotype, and then we expect to see the increase the proportions of non-vaccine type. So that's why.
Yes.
We try to say multiple serotype has clinical impact. I'm not convinced at all from.
Actually, I.
Bhim-san, can I say something?
That's true, actually.
We possibly try bacterial load of individual cell type, whether there's any difference in terms of bacterial load of individual cell type. And then we want to see some associations cell type frequency and bacterial load. So the cell type specific bacterial load, that's what I might be interested in.
Yeah, I understand.
So in Japan, if bacterial load cell type 3, we expect it higher. Have you done that kind of analysis? So
yes.
We can try to answer the same questions we answered in our Vietnamese data set. And then if you saw exactly the same finding, that is very good. And then you could claim that our finding in Vietnam were confirmed in the Japanese elderly populations. And then second, if we apply this very sensitive nanofluidic technique, we can see far more higher proportion of individuals carrying the multiple cell type. This is very fast.
Yeah.
But don't try.
Yes, thank you.
Try to demonstrate it in the clinical outcome. So that's my comments.
Thank you.
Bhim-san,
Little serotypes.
Hi.
Yeah,
it was so nice. Thank you very much for the nice presentation. And quite interesting that there are multiple serotypes in one person or one patient. And yeah, in terms of from the clinician, the view of the clinicians, it is important that like in introduction you have introduced about the one cases that two different serotype, which is the different resistance pattern for the antibiotics, right? I think in the introduction, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if it is very important in the clinical management because there is a different, if there is a different resistance pattern in the one patient in the one pneumococcal diseases, one is a penicillin resistant and one is a penicillin susceptible. If the culture, we believe that the culture results and the resistance pattern from the one serotypes, but if there is another serotype exists, and maybe we can treat the patient with like a penicillin, but believing the resistance pattern from the bacterial culture, but the patient not recovered because of the multiple serotype infection like this. So it is a very interesting pattern. So in your study or in our samples, do you have a data of the drug resistance patterns? with the information of the serotypes. It is linked or not?
I'm not sure who's doing here, but
There's no way.
probably not.
Because there's no way, because in order to find out the second dominant one, you have to screen 100, more than 100 of colonies.
Yes,
Mm.
Not possible. Unless you apply
it's very difficult.
for detecting drug resistance. That's what we try. That's what we're trying. You see, although we haven't achieved that. That's why, you know, that is one he was working on, but we haven't achieved it. Now, also, I mean, when you actually show this slide and then these two previous paper, you have to be very, very careful. There are fundamental difference between this paper and your data. You are invasive pneumococcal disease. You are just picking up nasopharyngeal colonies, and then one dominant one. This perhaps might be causing pneumonia, but second dominant, third dominant, fourth dominant, they are just a colony, they're just sitting there.
But in my understanding, in the adult cases, there's a few cases have a colonization in the nasopharyngeal swab, right? In the
Yes, it's a less than two.
pediatric cases, there are many colonies has detected from the healthy children, but from the adult.
Another possible, well, in that sense, that might be possible idea, might be those pneumococcus ecology. We are all thinking that the one single cell types are transmitting individually, independently. You know, that is our kind of hypothesis or presumptions. But by looking at your data set, say about 50% of adult individuals having some pneumococcus as multiple cell type, means transmission itself might be not just on this single cell type, might be transmitting as well. Multiple cell type might be transmitting, and then among these 4 or 5 cell types, one single cell type which is dominating and the most fit to replicate, may dominate and then cause the disease. That might be happening.
Yeah.
I might interpret that way.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable explanation. Since I also think the same way, because this pneumococcus disease starts from the colonization, so we find colonization, and the same pattern in this sample also. So this multiple serotype, I mean,
So
information also.
Another question is that because the Morimoto sensei, they have done colony survey. They have screened elderly people in nursery form without any symptoms, and those elderly who carry who has a colony do not have a disease. Well, I just wonder whether they have a heart attack or not. You haven't done the download, you know.
I think one paper we did, ecocensus paper.
Yes, did you do? And the multiple cell type?
Yeah, multiple serotype also. It's high. It's around 30-40%.
So almost the same population, same prevalence. Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
And then my question is that in terms of bacterial load, whether there's such a discrete difference between the first dominant and second dominant. My guess is that in healthy individuals just carrying pneumococcus may have perhaps a similar quantity of the first and second dominant. So maybe the difference might not be 100 fold, might be. I don't know. Have you done that one?
The load and density analysis that I haven't done, only the qualitative one, because the load is so low.
So look,
Because it was a adult, not very low, like not like children, very very low. It's like not much, mostly like a 10 to the power 3, 4, not like that.
right, but then you found multiple cells. So that means the difference between first dominant, second dominant might be very small. And then if you actually show that information as well in parallel of this, that may can tell people that maybe transmission might be happening multiple SP are transmitting, and then only one replicate dominantly and then cause the disease. This might be interesting. So that's when people do vaccines, people always have to think, the transmission might be happening behind the predominating bacteria alone.
Yes, yeah, that I look at. I think I have the data. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Bhim Sensei.
Hi.
I have some question. I'm not familiar with this area of study, so but my question is very basic. And so the serotype is stable in bacteria, or the serotype can change? So how about in patient? The serotype can change in patient?
That's a very, very nice question.
Bhim-san, you should unmute. Unmute.
The question was about the whether the serotype can change or not. Yeah, serotype can change one serotype to another. That's called capsular switching, and after PCB conjugated vaccine, the rate is higher, but it's still not so higher, I think people say, but it does occur. And actually it was reported before introduction of this conjugated vaccine, before 2000. So, but the rate has gone up. So another question was whether this can happen within the patient or not. So in terms of nasopharynx, yeah, colonization, it can occur, but inside the invasive pneumococcal disease, not proven, but some people, I have in some papers they have assumed that it can change the cap, yeah, but not proven. I don't think it's proven. Yeah.
I think to answer that questions, in Vietnam, in Dr. Lê Min's community-based healthy carrier study, I think about 6 months apart, the same children were followed up. And then, of course, serotype change. Some serotype remain, some serotype change. So that happens. But the question is that because of multiple serotypes that are already existing there? And then, depending on the time, the serotype which is predominating is a different, or the different serotype are transmitted or not. That we don't know. But one thing really clear is if you don't have a serotype, you cannot create serotype. Unless you are transmitted, there's no new serotype is coming. I mean, emerging in vivo, de novo.
Yes.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So, any other question from the
quick one, Bhim. You said earlier something like in South Africa, the multiple serotype was less than 1% or something.
Yes.
In Japan, more than 40. What's the explanation for that dramatic difference?
Sorry, that's in South Africa. What they did, like invasive, like they do the blood culture. All are invasive.
Okay, so it's a different, it's not exact comparison.
No, so our is a mostly non-invasive pneumonia. We just see in the sputum. So but the one they compare.
So South African one.
The study of all invasive pneumonia.
South African one is really reflecting that perhaps there is only one single cell type. The vast majority of cases, only one single cell types are causing the disease, and that's why the proportion of double cell types was very small from South Africa. That's what I believe. I don't know. I mean, if you think that if you apply,
it's really, this assumption is really.
Yeah, you think you will see the higher prevalence? Is that what you think?
I think it should be higher than that. They also assume that. I mean, they also accept it's not like a tremendously high, super high, but should be more than the conventional. I mean, the conventional method we are detecting. I think.
Well, I mean,
obviously.
if you apply nanophoretic technique in blood culture, and then you found multiple cell type, I will be convinced. It's a completely different story.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need to do.
It's a different story.
We need to do all this. Invasive study. That's really important. That's really important. Yeah. Yes, Chris. The comparison was totally different.
Sure.
Invasive pneumonia. Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Chris, do you remember how many CAP studies we got the pneumococcus bacteremia? There must be some, but not many.
Yeah, it's still one of the higher ones, isn't it? I think in the blood culture.
Yeah.
It's like more than leptodengue, and I don't know, maybe 10%. I really have to check.
Even like at 10 or 20, we had bacteremia pneumococcus from our CAP study, and the Bhim can try, because if you think that your proportion is that high, if you do 10, 20, we must be able to find 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3 cases.
We can check.
Well, this has been a long argument between Bhim and I. Bhim always want to convince me that multiple cell type is important because it's caused some clinical severities. Now, I always, fighting against him by throwing a lot of difficult questions to him. Anyhow. But in terms of transmission, it's important, I think. In the past, I wasn't think of. I was somehow prejudged that maybe single cell type is transmitting, but which is perhaps less likely because the transmissions are happening usually from healthy individuals, not very sick individuals in the hospital. So I don't know.
Okay. Any comments or questions? それと若い方積極的に質問してください。せっかくの機会なので。松井先生、誰か指名してもらってもいいですよ。
What is the definition of wakai?
So I think among us, the youngest doctor maybe is me.
はい。
So I just want to make a quick comment on Dr. Kensuke's question. So it might have some impact on the multiple serotype infection, because as he said, it's possible that the one serotype is completely susceptible and another one is resistant. So if we start treating patient by very narrow antibiotic, it can be a failure later on. But usually we start rather broader antibiotics first. So as Bhim-san said, the second dominant one is quite fewer than the first dominant one. So I think as long as we start the broad antibiotic, then the impact of the second dominant one is quite small in clinical setting. So that's what I thought.
Thank you. 山内先生、大丈夫ですか？大丈夫かな？はい。
ごめんなさい。
はい。
今、ちょっと外してて、すみません。
はい。So, Yamauchi sensei, you have a question? No?
I'm sorry, I joined
Okay.
30 minutes later, but maybe the important thing is what is the impact of finding multiple serotype infection in clinical setting.
Bhim sensei?
Well, that's what we have discussed for the last.
Yeah, I understand.
Question.
So that was my question.
Yeah, so actually this multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia is really very new thing. So at the moment we are just trying to diagnose, okay, this is multiple serotype and this is single serotype. So still many people don't agree with the diagnosis by PCR. So we are very beginning stage. So but the present data shows not much different from single and multiple serotype clinically if we compare head to head with a single serotype and multiple serotype. But if you just compare multiple serotype, there are some clinical features which are severe, but in terms of pneumococcal vaccines, polysaccharide vaccines, it seems like those who are getting multiple serotype pneumococcal pneumonia, maybe they get more benefits from the vaccines. Yeah, I think that is also a new finding. I think most.
Well, that's.
Suzuki sent the Suzuki sent his paper. He hasn't distinguished single and multiple, I think.
You see, if someone has multiple cell type, say 5 cell type, and someone have 1 cell type, which one has more likely to have non-vaccine type cell type? They have a 5 times more chance to have non-cell type.
Yeah.
They have a 5 times. If we have multiple, they have a more chance to have non-vaccine type. You see, so you are not addressing fundamental questions. People want to know. So all what we want to know is whether the second dominant one has any impact on clinically. That's very important questions. And then you answer no. Your answer is no. That is the difference between me and I'm saying that your data is very valuable, but I do not agree how you sell your data, how you interpret your data. If you said the second dominant is important, then I said no. I said the second dominant from your data has very little clinical impact. At least we cannot see any clinical impact by the second dominant. That's very understandable because it's 100 times less. And this one just bystander, I mean, they are just bystanding there, right? If they have some clinical impact, we have to always have to think antibiotics susceptibility for both first dominant and second dominant and the third dominant, right?
Yeah.
At the
Yes,
moment,
that's true.
don't think that perhaps may not be necessary. So that's first our conclusion. So clinically at the moment, we don't see any evidence. But epidemiologically, it's very important because the second dominant, third dominant, they're more likely non-vaccine type and they are transmitting very often. At least about 50%, 48, I mean, almost half of Japanese elderly people who have pneumonia, and we're always thinking the predominant, first dominant serotype and so on, but they're always carrying second, third, fourth. So in terms of transmission, in terms of vaccine, vaccine policy, vaccine serotype decisions is very important.
Yes.
So in terms of epidemiology, it's important, but in terms of clinical at the moment, we don't see any sort of evidence yet. And then your finding is compatible with what we found in Vietnam. According to Bhim Gopal's paper, we found the same result as them in Japanese adult populations. Fantastic, you know, you created two very important Nobel data, and then both of them drawing the same result. Don't say something different, you know.
Thank you. Yes. And I think that the comparing with the healthy adult sample is also a nice idea. So
yes, I think definitely you should. That is very valuable information. Not many people done community-based healthy adult screening and then apply, and then you found multiple cell type.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Yes.
And then I think we can say
look at the data again.
Prevalence of pneumococcus among adult individuals in Japan, or I think maybe we can generalize, generally speaking, adult populations, the persons who carry the pneumococcus are very minority. Therefore, they are not really much contributing to pneumococcus epidemiologies. I think the children, this is the children who are transmitting pneumococcus to the society, to the communities. So if we focus vaccines on new children, and then all adult cases will cease.
Yes.
And even those adult individuals, even that small number of adults who carry pneumococcus, they have a multiple cell types, which really makes sense, isn't it? That means that really make me start to feel maybe transmission is not happening single cell type but single. It might be multiple cell type might be being transmitted at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I spoke too much because it's first time for me.
I think I really nice discussion.
I should have had the discussions before this. It's very important for me, your data.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think lots of things are clear. It became more clear to me also. Yeah. Any more questions? Queries?
Okay, thank you. Kikuchi says.
So I can talk about next research meeting.
I think it's maybe very soon. Kakeuchi is now writing up another paper based on the adult pneumonia studies, which is also very interesting for everyone to understand what he's trying to do. As I mentioned, so he has been working on clonal type based on MLST multi-local sequence typing. And that will give us the different idea of how to interpret serology, because we cannot just look at cell type. We have to really look at the sequence type whenever we discuss about pneumococcus epidemiology. So I think he is almost ready to share his information with all of you. So I'm going to ask him.
So Aryo Sensei, so you mean that in the next research meeting we have a presentation by Dr.
We're going to have a two, maybe. We don't. I mean, today we have a very long, but maybe we can cut and we can generalize.
So I will try to arrange. Okay. So
yes, please. Remind me.
Is Kakuchi, Dr. Kakuchi able to present next week or next week?
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, yeah. Yes,
okay.
I think.
Okay, and in the meantime, I also want to have some English case discussion as well.
Yes, please.
Yes.
So,
if we have agenda, maybe we can have next week, Wednesday too.
Okay. Then, Masumi Sensei, maybe she's going to present a case next week.
That's great. Okay. That's great.
Okay, maybe on the Zoom.
All right. Okay. Great. Chris, is that okay with you?
For me, yep. I can join. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhim.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
菊池先生、この前ありがとうございました。一日お疲れ様でした。
お疲れ様です。高橋先生、参加が遅くなってしまい、大変申し訳ありません。
はい、来てくれてありがとうございます。もうほぼ終わりかけたところだったので、後で録画してるのが、興味あればということでリンクを送ります。
ぜひ見させていただきます。すいません、今日ご案内いただいたので申し訳ありません。
この前の疲れませんでした、丸一日朝から晩まで。
そうですね、すごい濃密だったので、さすがに長時間座りっぱなしだとちょっと腰は痛くなりましたが、
そうですよね。
楽しかったです。はい。
はい、お疲れ様でした。
本当にありがとうございました。
はい。じゃあ終わりにします。はい、
わかりました。はい、ありがとうございます。
お疲れ様です。はい。
お疲れ様です。
お疲れ様です。
お疲れ様です。